Remember that when you were a child, you dared to dance in the rain, to paint the walls with joy, and to write and tell stories that made everybody laugh. What if that child, with boundless courage and untamed imagination, didn't give up on their creativity? I'm Madlina Preda, and today on the Honor podcast, we're joined by the world-renowned artist Alexandra Nechita. Welcome, Alexandra.
Thank you.
We are thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Your artistic journey started at an extremely early age. And what I would love to know is, how has that shaped your vision as an artist? Starting with the work in your childhood and looking at what you do today.
So yes, I absolutely have a wildly unique and unusual circumstance to my success story, if you will, to the launch of my career, if you will, which is marking its 30-year anniversary this year, which is wild because I'm not even 40 yet. But I signed my first publishing deal when I was 10 years old. And, it's difficult to not have a skewed perception of how it's influenced me and how it's shaped my identity because of what an incredibly formative time all of this whirlwind took place, right? I didn't have um, a normal childhood to compare it to. It's all I knew. I became obsessed with mark making, but I didn't really know that I wanted to be an artist. I just knew that I wanted to tell stories on paper, visually, with colors and shapes and lines. And then timing and helpful people and, you know, norok, like we say in Romanian, because a little sprinkle of good luck goes a long way. Um, all of those things together, hard work, discipline. I mean, it's just a multitude. It's a cocktail of things. It's not one thing that the recipe includes. Together are what brought me to a long, sustainable, prolific, dignified career.
That sounds absolutely amazing and inspiring. And I would love to know, Alexandra, how did the experience of being featured in Boys Meets World at such an early age has actually influenced the way you look at fame versus creativity?
So I think, for me, I had already gotten a taste of a lot of this, crazy attention and fame, if you will, from all the magazine covers and all the press and being followed and all the things. So I had already understood that I was living a different life. Um, the opportunity that Boy Meets World gave me, because I knew what Boy Meets World was. I was a little girl who seldomly watched TV, but when I did, I would watch a show like that. And it gave me in my head this chance to connect with my age demographic, to connect with my peers, to say like, look, I'm not that weird. Look, I too am 12, 13, 14 years old. I too have a crush on a boy. I too want to be with my friends. I too want to do these things. And so I think from that perspective, I didn't look at it from the accolades that it would bring me publicly so much as what I thought it would do internally within my so-called, peer group. But the interesting part of your question is, sort of the difference between the dichotomy between looking at what creativity is versus fame, right? Uh, I think the two have nothing to do with one another, frankly. I think that the fame is sort of either a gift or a curse that comes based on creativity that resonates with people. And whether that is your craft is theater or dance or music or art, whatever it may be, you are able to potentially galvanize that kind of sort of avalanche of attention if people do connect with your authenticity and if they do connect with your creativity and they do connect with, whatever your product is, so to speak. So I think now there is a bigger link between the two because of all of the social platforms that are allowing creators, content creators, all kinds of creators to really establish their own personal identity without the structure and the framework of, society or whatever the industry is. So, whereas before for an artist, for instance, like there was right? You would go to art school and you would struggle and you would make this beautiful portfolio and you'd knock on doors and you'd get underpaid or not paid or hope that maybe you'd get some kind of like respect or attention or wow, a show. What does that even mean? How could that even happen? Right now, what has happened with, social media in the last however many years, e-commerce platforms, the opportunity for people to, bypass a lot of other sort of middlemen and middle women, so to speak, and really take ownership of their own identity and their own autonomy and decide how they want to be put out there. So I think now fame potentially is more of a collaborative tool in that within the creative space. But I think when I was sort of coming up, it was far less connected.
That's a very interesting perspective, and I would say um, that Boy Meets World was a defining moment in your journey and help you connect and build a connection with the people around that were your age or your peers. Were there other defining moments throughout your career that have shaped your identity?
I have had the extraordinary gift of traveling with my parents for years and years and years because I had such a um, sort of sensational beginning to everything. It was also this incredible like gratitude that was like grounding me all the time where I was like, I'm so lucky, I'm so thankful, you know, another Romanian expression, bate fierul cât e cald, like beat the iron while it's hot. It's actually an English expression, which by the way, I've never used in my life, but I've used the Romanian one 100 times. Um, and I think there's all these different sort of feelings and triggers and damage control that you're trying to do while you're in the midst of it. So I think traveling for me with my mom and my dad and my brother for a lot of it was one of the most bonding parts of all the things that we've gotten to do together. I then, as I got older, I wasn't going with my mom and my dad, and so I would take my grandma with me. And like in theory, I never needed to because I was already an adult at this point. But I would take my grandma with me to every single exhibition, every single event, because I didn't necessarily want to be alone. And more than anything, again, I recognized what a gift it was having that time with my mom and my dad, seeing these new places, doing these new things, engaging with new people with them to then come home and like retell stories and like really just immortalize this like these chapters of our lives together. That I said I want to like continue that with my grandma. Why not? And so mama, as I call her, and I would like, I would have, while I was at UCLA, I was doing the most insane thing, getting on a red eye on a Wednesday night, getting to the East Coast, doing an event, coming back Sunday to make it in time for a 7 a.m. lecture. And like, but I was with her and we'd hang out and we'd watch, terrible TV together and we'd order room service. And, there's just these moments that like, again, when you're in them, it's hard. It's not that you don't appreciate them, but it's hard to recognize how incredibly special they are, and then you look back in retrospect, you have offspring, you don't, whatever it is, there's certain things in life that will trigger in you this innate appreciation for those kinds of moments. And I think the traveling as a whole was one of the greatest gifts that I ever had and that I was ever able to share with my family.
This extraordinary journey, almost resembling Alice in Wonderland, must have been like a roller coaster. So, my question is, what kept you grounded in your purpose? How did you manage not to lose sight of that?
I think that I know that had it not been for them always checking in and being steadfast about my own personal well-being and my own self-security and how I was feeling about things, keeping me um, involved in conversation constantly. Everything was a conversation. I think it would have been very easy for me to have been derailed. I think it would have been um, easy to have gotten extremely overwhelmed, um, perhaps even burdened at times. I think that they did an extraordinary job in making sure that I was still always like okay during it. Now, this doesn't go without saying that they aren't the ones who pushed me the most and created the ambition inside of me and taught me the discipline and did all those things, because it's true. And I'm eternally grateful for that, because I see that there's a deep lack of that in the world at the moment, and so I wish people would return to some of those um, approaches, because I think there's a benefit in a well-balanced sort of hustler mentality. But I would say that it's them. And then I think I love deeply the relationship that I had with my craft. So I do believe that because all of this was born out of passion, and it was born out of a really organic, natural, like a kid who just liked coloring books, that developed a talent, was born with a talent, was God-given, I don't know, all of the things, sure, good timing, helpful people, luck, et cetera, et cetera. But because the foundation was always rooted in my love for what I was doing, it was very, very hard for the wind to break me. And I think that that is even now, in the face of a lot of shifts and economies crashing and landscapes changing and, galleries going out of business and all the things. I think what roots me and what keeps me and holds me strong in the face of so much uncertainty and so much doubt and so much, wild chaos, is that I am so deeply connected with this raging impulse that I have to say things and make things.
So, if you were to give an advice to artists that are overwhelmed by these expectations and that current need to find the authentic self, but also maybe please the audience, what would that advice be?
The art world is a very precarious industry, and it sat on the side of the fence for a very long time, of extreme sort of hierarchy and, a nice dash of elitism. And for the artists, it was um, this is the formula. You go to art school. I mentioned you build your portfolio, you have nail-biting nights of anxiety, you lose weeks and years and wait over producing a body of work. You do all the right things for then there to be a big head honcho gallery man to tell you, nah, not good enough, right? Um, the beautiful thing that's happened in the last like 15 years, I think, is that entire landscape has really been tossed on its belly by virtue of some artists directly saying no to the system, by virtue of, the way industries roll and shape and economies and all the things, how people buy art, how, more are hyper focused on investment, other are actually buying because they love, it's a multitude of things, right? Where they were when I was beginning as a young artist, um, was a very, very different framework and a very different set of standards and expectation. And like, if you did this, you were too commercial. And if you did that, oh my gosh, you want to work with a big brand, like you're going to be a sellout. What do you mean now you're selling your paintings here and you're selling your paintings there? It's like, if there wasn't this sad sob story attached with your artist story, it's like you weren't worth it. It wasn't good enough. The art isn't born of depravity and depression, then it's that there's no story there to be told. It's like that language has been entirely shifted, and it has changed tremendously, I think, in favor of the artist. And it's giving artists an opportunity to put themselves out there. I think my biggest advice is not to be scared to be that multi-hyphenate, that if you want to, paint a painting today and tomorrow sculpt a vase and next week host a podcast and Monday do a makeup tutorial, go for it. Like, if those are all things that resonate with you and those are part of who build what you are, and in turn build the art that you're making and the product that people are consuming or enjoying or buying, then do it. I think not feeling like you need to be pigeonholed into an industry or a brand, like if your interests are expanding outside of what your, talent bracket is, go for it. Like, even for the sake of exercise, even for the sake of just like a creative break, to do something different. I think that is my biggest advice to all young artists, is just go do all the things that excite you, because you're going to do it better just for the sheer fact that it's exciting you.
And you mentioned how everything has shifted and all these changes have actually played in the favor of the artist. Um, what role do you think technology and innovation has played in redefining the way an artist can approach this multifaceted way of presenting themselves?
I mean, technology is an immense gift for the artists and for the studio practice, I think. Outside of, let's not even talk about marketing and all the other things that it can be a huge asset for, right? I'm personally, understanding the incredible way that it can optimize your creativity and your ideas. You know, again, I'm not that old, but I'm born out of a generation of like very old school traditionalism. Like, if I have an idea, I take a pencil and a paper and I write it down. If I have a concept for a painting or a drawing, I do the same thing and I draw it out. I want to make a sculpture. I start off with a metal armature and I throw on chunks of clay and I build it out, right? This is how I was taught. This is how I was trained. This is how I do things. Well, what happens now with all these extraordinary programs and all this insane software that exists, you are getting the opportunity to work with things like Nomad or ZBrush and put on Oculus and start sculpting in thin air, right? Because my hands have the muscle memory from working with clay for so many years or for painting a painting that, doing this and doing this and sculpting like this and carving out is, while it sounds and looks silly, comes very naturally to me, right? And so I think it is such an incredible time to be creative. And it gives the opportunity for artists to dream well beyond their means, well beyond their immediate experience. So, you can scale things to 10 times the size in an instant, right? You can immediately see what this little sculpture that I made with my hands in my studio would look like at 12 meters outside in a garden with a water feature behind it, like in 5 minutes with the right kind of graphic guy, basically. And so I think that it's extraordinary, and I'm looking at it as a huge asset, and it's something that's lent itself tremendously for this next chapter of my life, because I'm moving into, I've always imagined my work functioning outside of the wall space that it usually adorns, right? I've always understood that, these elements are, when someone buys a painting and they're collecting a piece of my work, I understand that they are now living with this, right? So, this is why I always say I'm not of the mindset of buying works for investment. I collect my own art. I've never bought anything because it's valuable. I bought it because I like it. I bought it because I want to wake up to it and make my kids breakfast and stare at it. I bought it because I go to sleep next to my husband in front of it every night. And I'm cool with that. And I want to do that. And it enriches my life. Right. And so I believe that most of my collector base collects on the same sort of philosophy and the same premise. And, I've also understood that not everyone has accessibility to a lot of these kinds of works that I make, right? And so, we've made different price points, so on and so forth. Beyond that, I've always understood that, especially now that I have my own home and my own, life, and I host and my friends and my kids and all the things, I'm like, the home is the ultimate gallery to someone's life, right? And if you're able to collect paintings and put them on the wall, great. But if you can't, then why not create that conversation on your dinner table? Why not find it in a beautiful vessel holding flowers that you've gathered in your backyard that week? Why not find it in a nice bookend that holds your children's, books together on their bookshelf? Why not? And so, in moving into this next chapter of my life and expanding sort of a Nechita brand into what will be an entire home line and doing all of that, I'm employing the use of technology more than ever, right? It's, I'm sitting on an iPad in Procreate changing colors to things in a matter of seconds. Whereas before, I have to sit there with a marker and a watercolor set and a whole thing. And so I think just the sheer efficiency and the way that it allows ideas to evolve so rapidly and make more room in this chaotic brain of the artist, I'm indebted to these investments forever.
Yes, so considering where the world is today, when we have so much innovation and change and technology, what would you paint or create as a message to the world right now?
I've always believed that the arts have a really powerful social voice. I've always believed that if you can, you should say more than just say the things that are casually on your mind. And if you have a platform and an audience that listens, then you should certainly say more. And so I think that now more than ever, it's so funny because I was painting so much about this when I was a child, right? There's a lot of these issues gravitating around peace and, um, the ethics of like equality and how I understood them as a kid. They were very sort of juvenile in a sense, but they're the exact same lessons that we seem to not be learning now either. And so, do unto others as you would like to have done unto you. It's like the basic, most banal lesson that every child that is, if they are lucky and loved and safe and protected by some shape form of a guardian, are told, right? And we move through life and we get hurt and we lose and we grieve and we do all these things and we build this like barrier and we build this sort of uh, um, like this impervious like shield that it's like us against the world constantly, this like this profile of victimization, this. And I think that if we just shed a little bit of that and just let a little bit of, again, I'm returning this word humility, a little bit of that humility just set in, and a lot of that recognizing that we are so much more alike than we will ever be able to understand. And at the core of who we are, for the most part, we all aspire for kindness, for understanding, for empathy, for consideration, to be heard, to be respected for our differences. If we could just do a little bit more of that, the things that we all batter our children with day in and day out, that we as adults cannot put into play, shame on us. I would talk only about that until the day I die if I could.
I'd love to know how you, for example, help your children to understand that or to be in line with this thought. How you educate them to think that way.
It's the hardest task that I have and the job I take most seriously, um, is implementing the right kind of guidance without indoctrinating my children and without ever teaching them any sense of entitlement, right? Um, how do you teach them to be grateful without making them feel bad for them for their circumstance and their blessings? How do you teach them, to be kind even in the face of unkindness? How do you teach them to be forgiving when someone has done them wrong? These are all huge lessons that only via experience will they actually be able to learn. My husband and I hope that every day, with the trivial little things of, she didn't sit at lunch with me and da 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 da, trivial to us as grown women. But this is their entire universe, and we're teaching them socialization and we're teaching them how to regulate their own emotions through these so-called trivial experiences. These are the things that are shaping them. And so I think Dima and I really hyper focus on maybe not so much teaching them how to do things or how to respond or how to get out of a situation, but these are tools. Put them in your big giant toolbox. You might need to get 10 more toolboxes in your life. Keep putting these tools in there. And when something has lost alignment, when you have lost alignment with yourself, open the toolbox and maybe in there you'll find the prayer, maybe in there you'll find some nice punching gloves. I don't know. Maybe in there you'll, like find the tools that we have spent the last 20 years giving you and teaching you through our experience and through wisdom and through your grandparents and so on and so forth. And so I think that it's not so much how are we teaching them, it's just we're just constantly adding to this reservoir of tools that we're hoping will enable them to stay emotionally regulated enough when the waves are too tumultuous to handle or they seem like it, when sadness feels like it's swallowing you, when, your heart gets broken, when all these things happen, because they do happen. Um, but always know that there's a collection of aid, so to speak, And of course, I think one big thing for us, huge, at least for me, like as uh, a mother to a girl, is constantly creating a safe environment for her to come talk to us in. Like that's a really big one. Like I always had that with my mom. I had it less with my father, partly cultural, partly girl versus dad thing, maybe. I'm not sure. Now I can't say it's the same. Now I can talk to my dad about anything, right? But at her age, at 10, 11, 12, 13, but I could always, always turn to my mom, even in moments where I felt like I was going to just suffocate in embarrassment, or whatever it was. I could always go and talk to her and be like, what do I do? Or please help me. Or what do you think? Or, and I want to create this open space of dialogue with my child, with both of my children, um, to where like there's never judgment. It's always safe. I think it's so important now, especially in a time where finding your safety here behind closed doors on a computer is becoming secondhand. And I think that this is such a beautiful thing that I don't want to ever lose, and it's hard though, because having conversation with your parents and talking to them eye in the eye can be very overwhelming. That's why my husband and our friends always ask us like, guys, there's a bus that can take her to school. Why won't you let her take the bus? This, it'll save you guys an hour a day, whatever. And my husband says, it's 30 minutes in the morning of where she won't stop talking, because she's not looking me in the eye, right? And I had this experience with my parents. I remember I would sit in the back and I never had direct confrontation with them. So if I felt a little squeamish about sharing something, I never felt like I was like being fully like taken in, if that makes sense, because obviously my dad's eyes are on the road, my mom's eyes are on the road. And so I think this driving together at this age is it's been a gift. It's served us well in our relationship with Tava specifically, because Rev is still too little, but where it gives her the space and the comfort to not feel like she's getting like, how do you say, she's having sit down and tell me how your day was. What did you do? Oh, why are you looking there when I'm talking to? No, instead it's like, we're driving in the car. Okay, tell me, what are you looking forward to? What are you nervous about? Da, da, da. And so it kind of just spills out, right? And so I think the open dialogue and the streamlined conversation is one of the most important things, at least the way I see it at this point in my parenting journey, which seems to take turns every day. So I don't know.
What I would love to know is that throughout your life, has there been someone that has inspired you to do that, has been supportive of you in that way, and who that was and what they did?
For me, it's again, I turn back to my parents and all of their sacrifice, and how every decision that they have ever made is always, always, even to this day, as I'm approaching 40 and my brother is 30, has always been with my brother and I at the top of their mind. So much so that we've had to remind them, like, guys, you need to take care of your own retirement, and you need to do things for yourself, because, like, we're going to be okay. We promise we're going to be okay. Like, this is how selfless the kind of parents they are. My grandma, who I was 4 years old when she came to visit me in America. So we came here when I was 2 years old. My mom and I reunited with my father a year and a half after he had left. He escaped Romania when she was still pregnant with me. My grandma came for her first 3-month visiting visa when I was 4. At 4 years old, we were already here for about 2 years. My parents were working like dogs. I mean, just nonstop. And like so many immigrants. And I was being, I spend most of my time with a babysitter. They found a local babysitter that they can drop me off to after school. She would walk me, this, that. And when mama came to visit me, and she's, well, who's this stranger? Like, thank you, but no thank you. Like, no. She came for what was supposed to be 3 months and never went back. My uncle was 16 years old at the time, her son, and she was very married to my grandpa, whom she left to raise me. And from then on, it was just us, like the two best friends, like she'd walk me to school, walk me back. At that point, I was getting older. And that's when I was developing this deep passion for painting. And so I think seeing this level of selflessness, which obviously came with a lot of loss and came with a lot of I'm sure, difficult conversation between her own child. For me, it's like, I think I really do believe that you get these like earthside angels that get sent to you, and for me, I have an army of them. And I think the main lieutenant is my grandma. you know
I just wonder how has this personal background and experience influenced the legacy you want to leave um, as an artist, but also as a human.
Tremendously. I think I don't recognize myself as an artist without my family background, without my cultural references, without my, Romanian values and all of those upbringings that come with, that kind of traditionalism and that kind of attachment to real identity of who you are, of never forgetting where you come from. I don't separate the two. There's a trendy thing in the art world where people love to like, you know, th- someone's like, oh, he's such an asshole, I don't want to buy his paintings. Like, well, if the paintings are really good, so you shouldn't care about what kind of person he is. I'm like, well, that's not how I operate, right? The argument is, oh, Picasso was such a terrible womanizer, and like, how could you? And how? Listen, it goes both ways, right? People do and support and condone whatever it is they want to. For me, I've never been able to separate myself, my value system, the that's all the makeup that makes me. That's part of my DNA, absolutely. And because my work is such direct extension of my own personal philosophies, and I perceive things via those experiences and via that upbringing, I mean, it's impossible to detach me or separate me. I don't think, I mean, I think you'd have to create a whole nother entity of a person to do that successfully. And so you know, I believe very much, that also without a lot of those things, without a lot of that ideation and belief system, I wouldn't have had such a sustainable career, and I wouldn't have remained, for the most part, I consider a very good member of my community and of my human community, not just my, local geographic community. I think that's all things that have been just ingrained in me from such a young age that were just non-negotiable. It's just non-negotiable stuff. I mean, like I look at even Max, who was born here. We're 10 years apart, spoke Romanian first. There's certain things that he's just like, even though he's had so much more exposure to this like very like American culture and this new generation, because again, we're 10 years apart, there's certain things he holds steadfast to that he's not willing to surrender in the face of being questioned or judged or all the things. And I think there's, look, that could go a lot of ways, and it could go in negative ways also when people aren't willing to adapt and they're not willing to change. But in speaking of fundamental systems that I think are constructs of who I am and who my family is, I think those are the things that keep us like kupicale pe pământ, and they like give us this opportunity to really excel and also offer the opportunity for other people to share in that.
If your life was a painting, what's the title?
I'm torn somewhere between like something relating to not the hyper focus of perfectionism. I think like, just like progress, not perfection. Like just as long as I'm growing, and as long as I am bettering myself. I think that's the goal.
Which artist inspired you the most?
Probably all the modernists, like, yeah, the Picassos and the Brocks and the Matisse and the Chagalls. Like, I think those are the first group of painters that I became most sort of familiar with at a really young age. And so I think just even for the sheer fact that they were my first real introduction to real art history, so to speak, they remain some of the most influential.
Song that boosts your mood every time.
Oh, honestly, anything my kids sing. There's this song called "Adore You" by Fred again. That's like always pops up in my playlist, and when it comes on, it's like this like kind of like islandy thing. I don't know. I love it. Yeah.
Thank you, Alexandra, for the very inspiring and emotional session today, for being so vulnerable and sharing so much with us.